And the problem we've got, we always concede. At the moment, it feels like we have to score 2 goals to even think about taking maybe a point. There is an issue with the squad. I think he does feel some of the players aren't up to it.
They know they needed a striker in the summer. That's why they were chasing Osimhen. That's why they were looking at Samuel. That's why they're looking at Duran. They've misprofiled in Kweku, and this is the position that they're in.
With Andre Santos, he's having such a great season at Strasbourg. You don't want to hamper his development.
If you're Manu, you're going to sit there and say, I'm doing more than you.
But Manchester United
I've been doing more than you.
Marc, he's a good defender, but for me, he's a B-side defender.
We shouldn't be in a situation where someone that was banished from the squad in the summer in Chalobah is now being recalled 6 months later, potentially, to come and fill the void.
I mean, imagine putting like a 27, 28-year-old John Terry alongside Levo Colwell. Imagine so they're learning on the job. There's a lot of things, I think, to look forward to. It's a good time for us just to maybe reset. We've got Bournemouth coming up next Tuesday. That is a tough game.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Inside Chelsea, the show for Chelsea fans by Chelsea fans. I'm Leonie Carpenter, and today I'm joined by former Chelsea defender Jason Cundy, lifelong Chelsea fan and broadcaster Kweku Afari, and he's snuck in, it's Matisse again. Hello, nice to see you all.
Hello guys, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, yeah, we'll go with Happy New Year. So another 2 games since our last episode, the 2-0 defeat at Ipswich, followed by a 1-1 draw against Crystal Palace. So that's just 2 points out of a possible 12 from our last 4 games. We're going to get right into it. We're going to talk about why this might be happening and how Chelsea are going to get back on form, which we are all very much hoping for. We're going to start with Crystal Palace, Jace. Maresca, he came out afterwards and said, we're just not putting away chances. What do you make of that? And do you think maybe that's a reflection of how he sees Nicholas Jackson?
I think, actually, when you look back over the games that we've dropped points in, there's been stages in that game where we've been on top, in particular that first half. Everton away was always a stodgy one. We know that's not a bad point, history there. But then you drop points at home to Fulham. We should have been 2 or 3 up against home to Fulham. Left the back door open. Really disappointing to concede the 2 goals the way we did. But we've had chances in a lot of these games, and we've not really put teams to bed. I go back over, even before this, Leonie, where we conceded late goals away to Spurs. 4-3, very tight, and the 2-goal advantages. Leicester away, Brentford at home. We've conceded late goals, but we've always had that 2-goal cushion. In the last couple of games, we haven't had that, and that's why we've had our pants pulled down, because we've not finished chances. Jackson had a number of really good chances. I go back to Ipswich even. We had hit the post. I'm not sure it's a penalty. That's by the by. Nkunku had a great chance. I could not see us not scoring, but we didn't. And the problem we've got, we always concede. Always concede. And at the moment, it feels like we have to score 2 goals to even think about taking maybe a point.
Yeah. I mean, Jackson had a fantastic start to the season. We were raving about him on this show. Do you think that Maresca's maybe getting a little frustrated and saying those kinds of comments like we're not putting our chances away? Do you think that's directed at him?
So ultimately, when you look at front men, it's all well and good talking about what they do off the ball. And Jackson's incredible off the ball. The pressing from the front, he does that better than any other forward at the football club. When you look at Nkunku play up top, it's night and day between what he does off the ball and what Nicholas Jackson does. But ultimately, as a striker, you're judged by putting the ball in the back of the net, and he's not done that recently. And we've struggled as a result. We were saying before that in the Palace game, you saw it coming from a mile off. Like, if we don't take our chances and don't take a double-digit lead or 2-goal lead, we're struggling. And we saw the equaliser coming from a mile off. And this Palace team that, granted, they drew with us at Stamford Bridge, but we've got a very good record against them recently. And it's worrying because in the summer, Chelsea were perpetually linked with a striker. That's what Chelsea needs to improve up front. And when Jackson had that hot start to the season, we thought that's our issue solved. But it's reared its ugly head again just as the transfer window's opened. And we will see throughout this window Chelsea linked with a striker, because to win this league or to compete for the biggest trophies, you have to have a striker scoring at least 20 league goals, I think anyway. And we're looking at other teams, not just us. Look at a team like Arsenal, for example, who've been challenging for the last 2 or 3 years. What does everyone say they need? A striker who scores goals. I'm not ready to give up on Nicholas Jackson yet. I think he's still got so much potential. This is only his 2nd season at the club. His 1st season, 14 league goals without any penalties. But it is worrying that we have to score so many goals to win games. And before this 4-game run, we were the top scorers in the division, or 2nd top goal scorers in the division. The goals have dried up and the wins have dried up as a result.
Yeah, and I think absolutely with what you've said, Kweku, but do you think the fact that Nicholas Jackson keeps starting games shows that Maresca doesn't have confidence in backup strikers, for example?
Yeah, I think when I came into the start of this season, I was thinking to myself, the goals need to be shared out. There's no way we should be relying solely upon Nicholas Jackson, who's still a young striker, who's still developing, who's still improving, to get us that 20 goals a season. And I think you have to also look at the contribution from the rest of the team. You look at Neto, 1 Premier League goal. You look at, Sancho, just a couple, even though his creative numbers are quite good. You look at Nkunku, outside of that Bournemouth winner, he's not able to start games and contribute. He obviously didn't start Ipswich, Jackson, and it was quite clear that the replacements weren't ready. Guiu is only 19 years old. He's not ready to contribute. So outside of Palmer, there isn't really anybody getting regular goal output. And when you look at the attackers, the ball striking ability is just not good enough. They're not striking the ball cleanly. We're not a threat on set pieces, and that's another way to get goals as well. Every time we take a corner, it's either short, in terms of the quality, it's not beating the first man, or the people in the box are not aerially equipped to actually attack it. So there's many direct free kicks, absolute non-threat. There's a lot of different ways to get goals, and when you eliminate all of those different ways, you rely upon one young striker. I think it's unfair of Chelsea to have put him in that position, and they know they needed a striker in the summer. That's why they were chasing Osimhen. That's why they were looking at Samuel. That's why they're looking at Duran. They didn't get the deal over the line. They've misprofiled Nkunku, and this is the position they're in.
Well, off the back of Nkunku as well, I'm going to ask you, Jace. Obviously, against Palace, he brought on Marc, who's shown real promise in games that he's come on with Chelsea. What does that say about Christopher Nkunku, though? He's not even getting off the bench.
What is Nkunku? Where's his best position? Who is this player? He's a 10 for me. I don't think he can play out on the left. That's fine. He can be a body out there for 15, 20 minutes. He ain't a number 9. Two totally different strikers. Kweku made the point there. Two totally different attacks. Two totally different setups. Two totally different links with either it be the wide men or whether it be Palmer, whoever's playing in that number 10 more often than not than Palmer. And I feel for Nkunku because he's caught between two positions. He's not a number 9 and he can't play 10. So where's his best role? Jackson, the whole role of that number 9 up top has been left down to Jackson this season. And Nkunku doesn't do that job. When he is given the chance, Newcastle away in the Carabao Cup, we were disappointing, so was he. Ipswich away, second half, disappointing, gets taken off. And I think he will probably have to think about his future at the club because there is no role for him in the system. Maresca has no place for him. He's using him because he feels he has to at the moment. And that's why he didn't come off the bench, because Guiu, whatever you think of Guiu's age, and I've seen a lot of him in the Conference League, we all have, there's something in this kid. He works hard, he's quick, he gets his goals. He missed a couple away earlier in the Conference League, but that's fine. Then he makes up for it, gets himself a hat-trick. The reason he's come on instead of Nkunku is because he feels that role, it's a better fit for Jackson. Nkunku's not that player, I'm afraid.
Take your mind back to a year ago when Nkunku was injured, and absence makes the heart grow fonder. And we were all waiting for him to come back because we thought he was going to be the goal-getter, the man that's the missing piece in this Chelsea system to help us get to where we need to get to. But I think he suffers from the fact that his best position is the position that our best player plays in. Cole Palmer is in that position. And I know that the board get a lot of credit for the signings that they made, and Cole Palmer was an astute signing. But let's be honest, Nkunku was supposed to play that role, supposed to give us the numbers that Cole Palmer's given us, supposed to be that guy for our club. And I think with football teams, when you've got that mercurial talent, which Cole Palmer is, he's one of the best players in the league, you need to supplement that with a striker who's also providing goals. We're over-reliant on Cole Palmer to get us goals. When Eden Hazard was that person for Chelsea, that mercurial talent, he was supplemented. When winning league titles, it was supplemented by Diego Costa giving us 20 league goals a season. And when Costa left, we haven't won a league title since. There is no coincidence in that. I think that when we need to, if we need to get to where we need to get to, or get to where we need to get to, it's off the back of a striker giving us regular goals on a regular basis. And unfortunately, Nkunku's not a striker. I know that Maresca quietened down the noise at the beginning of the season, saying, got 2 players for every position. And when he went through that, he listed Nkunku as a striker behind Nicholas Jackson. But he is not that, like Jay said. He is a number 10 that operates in similar positions to Cole Palmer. We need to address that issue, and I don't know how we go about it.
Just while you were talking there, I was thinking to myself, could you put Palmer up top and have Nkunku in behind? But then you're then
misprofiling Palmer.
You're then changing the system. Your best player, you're taking him out, and that doesn't feel right. And that's all I can come up with.
All I think he could do is revert to last season's Cole Palmer position, which is right wing, and you give that overlap, whether it be Gusto, whether it be Achampong, or if Reece James is available, and you put Nkunku in the middle. I think the issue he has with that, I don't think he trusts Nkunku to press in the same intensity that Cole Palmer does. Because when you watch Cole Palmer off the ball, he often gets into the front two of Jackson and they press. And some of our best performances this season at home to Aston Villa in particular, the press was absolutely phenomenal. So even though I don't trust in Kweku to lead the press as the striker, you still need to be able to press in that 10. You still need to be able to be trusted defensively. And I don't think he trusts him off the ball. And that's no surprise. He picked up a lot of injuries over the last couple of years. He's not probably physically able to compete in terms of that level of intensity without picking up another injury. But that leads to the point of where are we really going to use him? And for me, I still think there's a good player in there, but I think mentally he might be kind of on the way out as well because he's got the World Cup not long away and he's going to need to be playing regularly.
Yeah,
so I've got to ask you then, Matisse, are we going to buy a striker in January? And who? Who, if we do, who?
I don't think we will. And purely because I think the club, the targets that they have won't move in January. I think Liam Delap often gets flagged purely because obviously he tormented us and he bullied us completely. He bullied Tosin, he bullied Disasi. Obviously got the goal. It wasn't a penalty in my opinion. But he's another player that's former Manchester City. Joe Shields is aware of. Enzo Maresca has, said he's worked with. And he's of that price range of maybe 30, 35 million if Ipswich were to go down. That seems to be the price range Chelsea are hovering around based on previous targets. So unless they get someone in on loan, there's been talk of Kolo Muani, he could be moving from PSG, Evan Ferguson from Brighton, again, a player that could be loaned out. Unless we get someone on a short term, I don't think Chelsea are going to change their summer plans, despite the fact that, for me, that striker position needs a lot of help right now.
Do you think we'll do business in January, Kweku?
I think we will do business. I don't know if it's going to be to reinforce the front line. I think we are where we are right now. And if you ask Chelsea at the beginning of the season, what's the targets? To finish in the top 4. And so if we hadn't had such a strong start to the season, but we somehow got ourselves to this position, I think people would be very satisfied. It's the fact that the last 4 games have been so poor and other fans are trying to entice us to talk about title race. We knew it. We saw our team. We watched our team week in, week out. We knew the frailties and the faults within our lineup. But I didn't think we thought those frailties and faults were with the front line. I think we all thought that it was defensively that we need to reinforce and improve. It's only in recent weeks that's reared its ugly head in terms of, is Nicholas Jackson really the guy who's going to lead us to Premier League titles? I think we will improve. And if there's an incredible offer on the table, there's an incredible player up for sale that we can maybe do business with, then we might approach it. We might explore that option. But for me, I feel like there's bigger issues in our team that we need to improve in January as opposed to improving or looking at that front line.
Jace, I've got to ask you then, January, looking at sort of the transfers, looking at the fact that we haven't had a backup striker. In fact, let's not even talk about January now. Let's talk about recruitment in general. We've actually praised recruitment a lot in this show. Do you think it's been good enough? And when you look at the midfield, you look at Caicedo, you look at Enzo Fernandez, they've been playing a lot of football recently.
Yeah.
They may be tired. We haven't got backups. What do you make of the recruitment
Well,
now?
the problem we've got in the middle of the park is also Lavia. Can't stay fit. He's another one of those at the moment. When he plays, his presence in that midfield allows Enzo to play higher up the pitch. We didn't play the inverted fullback at the weekend. You noticed that Cucurella stayed defensively solid. Right back stayed defensively solid. We never had the extra man in the middle of the park. When Lavia's there, it naturally forces Enzo on. Enzo was still making those runs. Because we have the inverted fullback, felt we were a little bit open in the middle of the park. Going back to your question, we spent a lot of money. Caicedo hasn't quite done that. He's still very young. He's still very much learning. Kane Chukwuemeka, another player in there, hasn't really been given the chance. I'd like to see what this boy's got under the bonnet eventually. In terms of Enzo and Caicedo, they're playing a lot of minutes. They're playing a lot. And there will come a point, they won't play against Marc at the weekend, obviously, but there will come a point where you might have to think about what happens in there, the recruitment next summer. Yes, it's been good, but we're still a body short and we spent a lot of money on this squad. I think players will leave in January. I think in the summer, there'll be players that will be sold, but that is an area really right down the spine of the team. Centre-back, centre midfield and a centre forward. We are still 3 players away from having a really good squad. It's a good squad. When everyone's fit, when they're not fit, it gets stretched a bit, particularly in the middle of the park.
I'd add with that midfield, though, I think that's the one position I actually wouldn't buy again. I think there's enough quality in there with the likes of Andre Santos, if they were to be recalled from Strasbourg. Leslie Ogachuku, I think, is a really good talent at Southampton. Obviously, we'll talk about Cassidy, who's potentially moving, Dewsbury Hall. I think the fact that those two haven't been able to contribute in the Premier League is actually... It's part of the reason why we're in this position, because when you spend 35 million on Dewsbury Hall in the summer, and yes, it's PSR and, there's other deals that have probably been related to that, but that person has to be able to contribute because you have moved on Gallagher. You have basically, without doing so, literally banishing Kweku, but you're not using him. He's clearly out of the plans. You were trying to move him on the summer. The player that you bring in has got to be contributing, and he's not. So I think if Dewsbury Hall had even been a half-decent signing for Chelsea, then we wouldn't be in such a panic station, because those midfielders, they're going to burn out. And if, God forbid, one of them were to get injured, then we'd really be in a mess in that midfield right now.
Double pivots are a great... in football, it's a great thought. You can play two in midfield, but it doesn't really work in modern football unless you've got an outlier in midfield. I think that Caicedo's absolutely incredible, but he's not N'Golo Kante. N'Golo Kante allowed you to maybe have one less man in midfield because he covers so much ground. But when you've got Caicedo next to Enzo, Jason made a great point, and you haven't got anybody inverting, it does leave us bare and leave us susceptible to being counter-attacked. And we saw that against Palace, and we all saw the goal coming from a mile off. And so... midfield is also a position that I feel like we were strong in, but over the last couple of weeks, because of injuries to the likes of Lavia, it now looks like a position of weakness. But I think that's just a perspective of football, right? When you don't win games, you start to analyse every single part of the team. It's like, all of a sudden defence hasn't been good enough since the beginning of the season, but the midfield's not good enough, or the front line's not good enough, the goalkeeper's not good enough. We are a good team. We are fourth in the league for a reason. But the perspective that we've got right now is off the back of 4 very, very poor performances. And so I feel like there needs to be some perspective, maybe take a step back as a Chelsea fan. We can't improve every area of the field in January. And I think midfield is probably the least of our concerns. We just need to get players back from injury, and Lavia is a key part of that.
Yeah, do you think, Jace, that he trusts those new players that have been brought in? Like, you look at someone like Chukwuemeka, even Dewsbury Hall, which is a really interesting one because he brought him from Leicester. Is there a lack of trust there? I mean, he knows the guy well, but what's going on with that?
It does feel like there's a bit of an issue with the trust concern, because he has players on that bench. Felix is another one, we've not even mentioned his name yet, where he chose to put Marc Guiu on at the weekend against Crystal Palace. If you're in Nkunku, you're sitting there, you must be thinking, my future lies away from this football. You must think that inside, because it's a game where he came on actually just before we conceded, but there was no changes after that. I think there is an issue with the squad. I think he does feel some of the players aren't up to it. And you saw the fact that he played Acheampong ahead of Tosin, again, tells you all you need to know about how he might feel about him. So there's a lot of that going on, I think, on the bench, Leonie. And the squad, in terms of the players he wants and uses and trusts, actually is getting smaller, not getting bigger.
Yeah, no, really interesting. And like we mentioned, Caicedo and Enzo, again, obviously won't play on Saturday. But are they two people that you will definitely see play against Bournemouth on next week? Absolutely,
yeah. Well, they need a rest. The game, I think this game against Morecambe's come at a good time for us, actually, because there will be some rest. Gives Lavia another week if he is going to return. I don't quite know how far away he is. You boys might better tell me, but I don't think it's imminent. It's not imminent, but it might give him another week. Looking forward to seeing what Guiu can do. Acheampong, I would have thought, starts. So there's a lot of things I think to look forward to. I think it's come at a good time for us just to maybe reset. We've got Bournemouth coming up next Tuesday. That is a tough game because they're in really good form. But I think that we will see a lot more of those fringe players. Felix. Interesting to see who starts up top, whether it's going to be Nkunku or Guiu.
Yeah.
I think Guiu might get the nod, you know.
It's got to be Guiu,
yeah.
For the longevity of the system, if you're planning on pressing from the front for the rest of the season, you need to give him the minutes.
He's impressed in the conference.
Yeah.
And then this is in front of Chelsea fans. We've seen a couple of games in the conference, but this is on a slightly different stage for him. We will see, but there's a lot of fringe players that we think, if I don't play against Morecambe, where am I going?
Yeah. Well, you were talking about Andre Santos earlier, Matisse. We know he's doing well at Strasbourg. What do you make of him? Do you think he's a player that needs to come back now?
I would love to have him back. I would have brought him back yesterday. Honestly, I would have brought him back yesterday. I think he's the type of player that will be able to fill Caicedo's boots a little bit if he were to get injured. Obviously, there is no real replacement for Caicedo in the squad. That's what happens when you have one of the best midfielders in the league. However, someone that can get about, can win tackles and interceptions, numbers are really good for that. And he can also contribute with a goal, which is something, again, our midfielders, they don't really have long-range ball striking ability. They don't really crash the box aerially. We know Enzo chipped in a little bit a few weeks ago, which was good to see. But Andre Santos does score. He does crash the box. He does get a few headers. He's been brilliant for Strasbourg. He's taken a real leadership role. And I think with a player like him, again, like you said, the narrative can change quite quickly because we have done some good business. This is a brilliant piece of scouting, signing someone like Andre Santos all those years ago. I remember watching him in the pre-season for Chelsea. He was even playing in the six and having a great game, dictating tempo, dropping deep, being press resistant. So this is a really, really talented midfielder that Chelsea, first team hasn't really seen. I don't think he'll come back, though, purely because it looks like Strasbourg are in a bit of trouble, fighting relegation. And I think, obviously, owning both clubs, there's a conflict of interest there to not, have them in a poor position. And if you don't bring him back, I think you have to look at maybe Leslie Okechukwu at Southampton, purely because we need a body. If Dewsbury Hall's going to leave, if Casadei's going to leave, and they've both been linked with moves away, you've got to bring someone in because Lavia's fitness is far too questionable.
What I'd say as well, though, is that with Andre Santos, he's having such a great season at Strasbourg. You don't want to hamper his development because there's not a guarantee that he starts for Chelsea. Say Lavia gets fit again, he's maybe third or fourth in the pecking order in terms of starting for Chelsea. I remember we did this a few years ago with Nathan Ake. We called him in January and he barely played for us. And that just hampered his development and tarnished his relationship with the football club because it felt like we were wasting his time. And so I think you have to bear that in mind as well. I know it'd be great to have all these resources, but we've already got such a big squad already. I know we're going to offload some players in January, but I don't think recalling Andre Santos at this point in the season is what we need to do because he's a player that's developing nicely over at Strasbourg, less pressure, more of a prominent position, and we might have an even better player come the summer if, as opposed to calling him right now.
The only argument I'd make is, if you remember when Caicedo obviously inverted from right back and we were able to play Caicedo, Lavia and Enzo in the same team, I think Santos would give us the ability to do that again. Yeah. And I also think for a team that is meant to be pushing really strongly in the FA Cup and also continuing in the Conference League, I do think the number, when you take away, this is obviously bearing in mind that Dewsbury Hall and Casadei would leave. I think that void needs to be filled by somebody, even if it's Okechukwu to come back or someone.
Well, someone that has been floating around of late is Kobbie Mainoo at Man United. We also saw that Cole Palmer liked a post about him, linking him to Chelsea. What do we make of that, Jason?
It's a difficult one to say, isn't it? The fact that we are talking about a player that's on £20,000 a week by all accounts and wants close to £200,000 a week, which is probably what he's worth in terms of his stature at the football club. I don't care about his age. He saw against Liverpool at the weekend, actually, what an influence he can be. I wonder whether this is an agent trying to smoke out a new deal. That wouldn't surprise me. That's not the first time that would have been done. It doesn't surprise me if we are interested either, because he's an exceptional young talent. It's difficult to say. The fact that Cole Palmer's liked an Instagram message, I read absolutely nothing to that. Why wouldn't he want Kobbie Mainoo? They've known one since they were kids, probably. Playing up against one another in Manchester. This won't happen in January. This is only one that's going to cook, and if anything does develop, but watch it closely because we know, with all the financial rules, we've had to sell homegrown players. What that means. It's pure profit. That's a word we didn't hear above 18 months ago, but it will be pure profit. Garnacho fits into that bill as well. Manchester United are but financially are not in as good a position as the football club should be, bearing in how big they are as a club. I don't know, it's a difficult one to have a real genuine opinion on it. I'll be amazed if they let him go. And the Man United fans will be absolutely devastated if they do.
You live in La La Land if you think that's going to happen. Like, Kobbie Mainoo is different to Cole Palmer's situation. I've seen a lot of Chelsea fans link it to that situation. Kobbie Mainoo is starting week in, week out when he's fit for Manchester United. He's one of their most important players. He's a link between the fans and the football club. And with Marcus Rashford probably being offloaded in January, Man United they cannot afford, just from a PR perspective, to lose a Kobbie Mainoo and to lose into another Premier League side who are supposed to be competing for the same things they're competing for. It's not going to happen. It's a lovely idea, and those two did a GQ shoot together at the back end of last year.
Well, it says it all, doesn't it?
They know each other, Cole Palmer and Kobbie Mainoo, but Manchester United selling Kobbie Mainoo to Chelsea is never going to happen.
I even question the 200k purely because it makes sense at Manchester United's wage structure because of how much they've overpaid so many of their players. But if you were to put it at Liverpool, it would make absolutely no sense with their wage structure. So it's quite an inaccurate valuation of what I think his wages actually should be. Purely because
base amounts over 200 grand a week.
Yeah, but that's due to poor negotiations on their part.
If you're Mainoo, you're going to sit there and say, I'm doing more than you.
But Manchester United have
I've been doing
got
more
to
than
fix
you.
that.
Yeah, but that's as a personal level. That's how you look at that.
Yeah,
100%.
You know, Casemiro's come in. You know, he's on thick end of 300,000. This is how it works. You're right. Man United have got themselves in the right hole because of the wages they've given, such huge wages on players like Mace now, who's picked up another injury. But if you're Kobe Mainoo, you're sitting there thinking,
but he's not worth 70k more than Cole Palmer. And that's the
length of the contract, right?
But when you bring that wage to us, there's no way
you're saying
we would
Kobe's
pay
going to
him.
come in on a 10-year contract at Chelsea.
Well, there's no way we would pay. There's no way we would pay him that figure that's been reported. There's no way Chelsea would pay that. No way. That would put our wage structure into disarray. But one thing I will say is I actually don't want him. It's not the profile of player that we need. We have enough of these kind of midfielders that are very technical, very good at going in between the lines, and he doesn't offer more goals. He doesn't offer more defensive solidity than we already have, especially with the young players that we have out on loan. Chelsea need to focus on addressing the needs of the team, whether that's a centre-back that is an all-rounder, that's quick, that's strong, good in the air, good on the ball, whether that's a striker to help Jackson, whether we go back to the keeper situation. Chelsea often, in these last few windows, get too distracted by, subplots and different other ideas and PSR and Felix and Gallagher. They don't actually address what they need. And that's why we're in the position, we're in when we talk about the squad.
It's a lot, isn't it? Let's talk about the manager now. Enzo Maresca obviously had a great start to the season. I actually spoke to quite a few Leicester fans before we got him. When it was confirmed, they said to me, Leonie, he's stubborn. If something goes wrong at Chelsea, he won't change anything. We're now going through this sort of mid-season blip. I personally am not too worried, but Jason, what do you make of it? And do you think he is a stubborn manager?
In terms of some of the changes, I feel there are moments in games where he could be a little bit more proactive. Fulham is a prime example of that. The game was slipping through our fingers. Even at 1-0 when we're leading, it was a question, it felt to me a matter of time. They kept going down our right, their left, kept going down there. Pedro Neto, I picked up a booking. He was now hamstrung a little bit. As Robinson's gone on the outside of him, we'll see what he's tried to do. Because he's tired, I felt that was an area we could have done something more about. When you go back to the beginning of December, when we're in around the top three, I felt at that time we overachieved, right? And no one here was getting overexcited about we're in a title race. Not any of us felt like that. Now you fast forward 4 weeks. I'm not getting overexcited about how things have dropped. Yeah, it's been disappointing, and I think you could have said this was inevitable because we're ahead of schedule going into December. We're now probably where we should be. We want to stop the rot because if we don't pick up a win against Bournemouth, the noise will get louder about where we are. In terms of Maresca, I think when a result is bad and the performance isn't great, in particular, I'm looking at our results. Second half performances, Fulham, Ipswich, Palace, all drop points. Second half performance, there's been a drop-off. And I think everyone's got to look at themselves, the players. But as a manager, I think you have to reflect and think, what could I have done differently to change the outcome of a game? I think every manager has to do that when things don't go well. And Maresca will be doing that. The bench, we've highlighted this already, it clearly doesn't feel there's enough on the bench that can change the game into our favour, which says more about the squad then, I think, than Maresca. But we will see over the next 2 transfer windows. I think Maresca will have a big input on what happens in January, players going out, and the summer players coming in.
That's one of the points at the beginning of the season. I was praising Maresca. I remember thinking about the Wolves game where everybody got on the Chelsea bandwagon. He made changes at half time in that game, and he was very proactive. And I think that was more of an indictment on some of the players that he was testing out. He was working out if he fancied Mudryk or not. Clearly, he doesn't. There was other players that he maybe was seeing if they worked in his system and they didn't. At the beginning of the season, he was proactive and he was making subs very quickly. Think about the game against Liverpool. Yeah. He made change at half-time. But in recent weeks, he's been very reactive in terms of his approach. And I don't think the best managers are proactive. The best managers make changes when they see there needs to be changes made. And I think he's just working it out. I don't think it's time to panic around Maresca. I think he's overachieved in terms of where people had Chelsea begin the season. Of course, we're optimistic as fans, but if you ask opposition fans, where will Chelsea finish? I had people telling me 13th, I had people telling me 8th, and we are 4th in the Premier League. Let's not get that twisted. We are where we're supposed to be, but it's been a disappointing few weeks. But we will get back on track. We just need to make sure we win these upcoming games. But all of a sudden, these fixtures look way more difficult than they did in December and November. When I was looking at the fixture, I remember coming on here and being like, we could be second, maybe even top come the new year because of the fixtures. Now you're looking at going to the Etihad. in a couple of weeks, and that's now a more difficult fixture than it was a couple of weeks ago. But there's no need to panic because other teams in the Premier League will also drop points. Apart from Liverpool, other teams are showing us that they've got frailties. You look at, we played against Arsenal at Stamford Bridge. We were better than them. And they're supposed to be one of the best teams in the country, if not Europe. And so we are competing, and we are going to have performances where we don't live up to expectations. We're going to overperform in some games. But by the end of the season, I think we'll be where we're supposed to be.
Where we are right now, though, our dip in form has coincided with City seems to be getting things back on track.
Newcastle.
They're the ones that you've got to really watch. So we're now looking over our shoulder. And Forest aren't going anywhere soon. They look like they're here for the long stay.
Yeah.
So it now feels as though that there's where there used to be 2 places up for grabs. It does feel right now there's only that 1, maybe 2 if the Champions League goes to 5, and there's a very good chance that'll happen. But I'm looking over my shoulder now as opposed to where a couple of weeks ago I was looking up at Liverpool. That's changed dramatically.
And in the last 5 games, I think we play Liverpool, I think we play United, I think we have Newcastle as well. So it's not the easiest end to the season. I just think with us, I like the point you made. I think Maresca, like you said, he's figuring it out. He's starting to figure out who he wants and who he doesn't. There's been a lot of influx of players coming in over the last couple of years, a lot of players going out, and he's not been a part of that. It's only this season now that he's looking at this squad. And the directors, as much as they are in charge of recruitment, as much as he is the head coach, they do need to make sure they give him players that he can trust and that he can rely upon. You're looking at games where you want to close out, where Lavia is out and Renato Vega's on the bench and he sometimes isn't bringing him on. Does he not trust him to come into this midfield and add a bit of physicality and a bit of still? Does he not trust Felix to come on and create a chance if Cole Palmer's not having a good game, maybe put him out wide or change things there? There's too many moments in these last few matches where it's very clear that a substitution needs to be made, but it's not being made. Now, I'm looking at Maresca for not being proactive, but I'm also looking at the board and saying, have you given him players that he actually needs or wants, the stylistic fit, the profile fit? That's where the combination needs to be looked at.
Well, I think it would be good to get a Leicester fan perspective. We've got a guest on now. It is Ben Jacobs, who is our talkSPORT reporter and works a lot with Chelsea as well. But of course, you are a Leicester fan, so we are going to pick your brains right now, Ben. What do you make of Maresca? Obviously, he had a bad second half to the season when he was at Leicester. Why was that? Is he stubborn? Does he lack a plan B? What do you make of him? Tell us all, Ben.
Yeah, I've purposely put up with Claudio Ranieri lifting the Premier League trophy behind, and there's that Chelsea connection with the Eden Hazard goal as well. But I think in the second half of the Championship season, when Enzo Maresca did get Leicester promoted and in addition did win the league, so we can't exactly call the second half of the season bad, but they had a wobble from kind of February that they were able to recover in the April period. And in that string of results, the away form in particular came under a lot of scrutiny. There was a 1-0 loss to Bristol City. They lost 1-0 to Millwall. They won 1. They lost 1-0 to Plymouth Argyle. And in all 3 of those games, the criticism was, again, around, as you alluded to, a little bit of stubbornness. And on the road, they struggled to break down teams with low blocks. The selection came under scrutiny. The feeling was that they were making needless errors at the back and putting themselves under pressure in tight games, and perhaps it was just better to abandon that and go long and more direct. But that's not what Enzo Maresca does. He's told the sort of quite famous story now of a home game against Birmingham City where Mads Hedmonton, the goalkeeper, played it short. He got blocked by Jay Stansfield. The ball went in the back of the net, and Maresca turned around to him at half-time and said, if you play it long, I'm going to substitute. You stick to your principles. So the principles came under a bit of scrutiny at Leicester for being too rigid. But I think the other thing was on the road, there was just a lack of appetite, even though on paper Leicester were dominant, much like Chelsea, compared to their opposition, to kill off games. And that really frustrated the Leicester supporters who felt like 1-0 was never going to be enough. And actually, we were lucky in the run in the back end of the season to score 1 at all. But if there were games where Leicester got ahead, home or away, in the second half of that season, you never felt like they had that killer instinct to get a second. And more often than not, even though they ended up getting promoted, Leicester found that that lack of a second goal cost them points. And that really ended up, by the end of the tenure and despite the promotion, frustrating some of the Foxes' fan base.
Ben, you've kind of described Chelsea
a
little bit right there, as you well know. I want to go back to something that I've noticed here, is in the second half recently where it feels as though the control... He talks about the control of a game. We didn't have control of the game. It's a phrase that he's used often. Even when we were winning games, he said about the control. Was that something that you felt in the second half whether it be in the beginning of the season or halfway through or the end, that second half that the game changed? And did he do enough to turn the game back into his favour?
Yeah, Leicester didn't have as much depth, so he certainly didn't use substitutions as much, and there was a heavy reliance on Vardy and his goals and Mavididi out wide. And the thing that I noticed at Leicester was less about substitutes, because you sort of accepted that squad was good enough, and so was the starting 11, and the fixture calendar wasn't as congested in the second half of the season. But it was very much a case of wanting the wingers to stay very wide and high up the field and still have that offensive output. And away from home, what happened was the wingers were not tracking back at Leicester and defending enough, and it was allowing opportunities and space in the centre of the park for home sides to dominate the game. The possession stats on the road dropped, and it meant that Leicester didn't actually have as much of the ball, and when they did, they were getting caught out at the back. So the big kind of criticism with Maresca was a little bit of inconsistency and a little bit of perhaps over loyalty to certain players. And by inconsistency, I mean they did it one way at home, one way away, even though they were good enough to play the same way home and away. And by loyalty, I mean Vardy was tiring at the end of the season and yet was still naturally very important. Mavididi was having to pick up a lot of slack centrally and wasn't getting back defensively as much. And then the deeper midfielders, which obviously at Chelsea could be an Enzo Fernandez, a Moises Caicedo, a Romeo Lavia if they're fit. At Leicester, it was a Wilfred Ndidi and a Harry Winks. There became needless pressure on them to constantly get box to box to keep the balance of the side. And if they lost the ball sloppily in central midfield with an errant pass, or just because they got out of position in an attacking phase, constantly Leicester would get caught on the counter-attack. And I think the fan base just felt like better game management would have resolved all of that. The idea that Leicester fans were glad to see the back of him, I think, has been over-exaggerated. And right now, I think Leicester fans, in hindsight, would love him to still be there, even over a Ruud van Nistelrooy and certainly a Steve Cooper. And remember a well-reported incident when the players went on a scheduled Christmas party to Copenhagen and they were holding up a sign saying, "Enzo, I miss you." So actually, behind the scenes, very liked by Top, the chairman, and the players, the fans were just a little bit frustrated because they didn't like, in the early stages, the slower kind of build-up. Then they got used to it, and then they felt that it was all a little bit too rigid, and it was like inevitable that we were going nowhere with the ball when we got nervous in the back half of the season and would ultimately be punished. But the bigger picture is that he got Leicester promoted and under difficult financial situation, and he actually won the championship. So we mustn't forget the fact that his record at Leicester was phenomenal, despite some of these criticisms that we're making in the second half of the season.
Ben, it's been great to have you on the show. We really appreciate your time. Thank you for your expertise, and we'll see you soon.
Look forward to it.
Oh, Ben, what a guy. We love that man. Matisse, just off the back of that, do you think Chelsea lack a plan B?
I said at the start of the season, I think the squad was built to play a certain type of football and a certain style, which I think was the perfect game. Everybody ball to feet a little bit. There are some runs in behind from Neto, but basically the ball's on the ground and Chelsea have got to cut through teams with a lot of precision and a lot of flair and a lot of, trickery. I don't think there was really a plan B in terms of the makeup of the squad, and I think, Maresca's only as good as the tools he's got to work with in terms of set pieces, in terms of crossing the ball and finding an aerial presence. I think Jackson obviously is as good as he's been. He doesn't have great box movement. I think that's something he needs to improve. He's not an aerial threat. He's not he's not able to go up against those centre backs. So that is something that limits Maresca in regards to what he can do, and he has to still stick to maybe certain principles and certain styles. So I do sympathise with him on that side, because if we were to give him more physical profiles or to give him alternatives in that regard, with centre-backs that could score from corners, maybe we would see different ways of Chelsea getting goals, and that would be the plan B.
I do think he does. We've seen plan Bs though this season. Think about the Brighton game at home. That wasn't necessarily slow, plodding build-up. There was just balls over the top because Brighton were playing a ridiculously high line.
Yeah.
And you think about the Newcastle game, and I know that took the genius of Cole Palmer to play the ball over the top to Pedro Neto, but we have gone long on occasion and it has worked. Think about the Wolves game away from home. That wasn't the slow, plodding, build-up play. So we have shown that there's different ways to skin a cat, and we've done that this season. Whether that's more on the players, taking it on them to to really affect the game and change the philosophy mid-game. But I feel like this Chelsea team has shown that they can win in different ways, in different manners. It's a case that in recent weeks we haven't seen that. But I don't think he lacks a plan B. I think that he just lacks the tools that he requires to play the football that he wants to play week in and week out. I do think there's a different plan for different opposition. I don't think that he's a manager that's stuck in his ideology.
Let's talk about our defence. We've had some issues of late. We've seen Wesley Fofana out. We're not sure how long it's going to be. Maresca has come out and said it's going to be for the rest of the season. Fofana himself then contradicted that with saying it'd be 4 to 6 weeks. What do you make of that contradiction? Firstly, Fofana being out, what do you make of that? What do you make of a potential contradiction? Is it miscommunication?
It's difficult to know, isn't it? Because, Fofana puts out one thing, and this is what we can sometimes get in social media. The manager says one thing, he's had the advice from the medical team, and then all of a sudden something comes out that's conflicting with that. I don't know is a straight answer to that. I don't have inside knowledge of Fofana's injury. The good news is it's not his knee, which I think everyone feared when we heard out potential rest of the season. Everyone's thinking, is it his knee? It's not. It's a soft tissue injury. In terms of us as a defensive unit, well, it is a unit. I know the back four get all the praise of the keeper, but the reality is Pedro Neto's got to do his job. Whether it be Felix on that other side, Sancho on that side, whether it be who's ever playing on that right-hand side, it may well be Neto. It could be anyone there. But as a unit, then you've got to think about Casado in the middle of the park, Lavia. There have been moments this season where we've looked good, but in a 90-minute game, we always give up a chance. Yeah. And whether that be a pass from Sanchez into Palmer's feet, he gets robbed, 2 passes later, all of a sudden we conceded. So as a unit, there's work to be done. Acheampong, I'm really pleased to see that he got his chance, by the way. I thought he was excellent against Crystal Palace. But as far as Wesley Fofana's concerned, I was just fingers crossed for the boy that he's out, not weeks as opposed to months.
Do you think we need to sign another centre-back now? Well,
it's interesting, isn't it? The fact that, we're looking at Crystal Palace with re-signing players or we're bringing players back on loan. It feels as though that something will be done in that area this window, whether it's going to be bringing back Chalobah or whether it's going to be Marc Guehi. That remains to be seen right now. But it does feel as though the hierarchy feel we are a little bit skinny in there. Mm-hmm. I'm worried just on that. I'm a little bit worried about Acheampong's development then. Yeah. I think he showed what I've seen in conference, and I think the boy has shown that there's developing in there for him.
I think if you were to give him 20 games, the narrative of him would be significantly changed. It doesn't take long for a young academy product. We've seen it with Lewis Hall at Newcastle. He's been given regular game time. He's now probably a shoo-in to start for England at the next World Cup with Thomas Tuchel. Considering all the injury issues they've had in that position with Shaw and Chilwell. I think with Acheampong, unless Chelsea, for me, are going to sign a complete centre-back that's going to add every single facet that we're missing, which is leadership, which is pace, which is aerial dominance, which is positioning. Unless you're getting a complete centre-back that ticks every single box, numerically, you have enough centre-backs. And the Crystal Palace manager came out and said that. He said, why do they need another centre-back when they have Tostin, when they have Disasi, when they have Acheampong that's just been... we've just brought back someone from Boca Juniors on a loan as well. Yeah. We have so many players in this position who spent decent money in this position as well. We shouldn't be in a situation where someone that was banished from the squad in the summer in Chalobah is now being recalled 6 months later potentially to come and fill the void. Marc Guehi, for me, as much as I like the player, I think he's very good. I think he had a really good tournament with England. I don't think aerially he's dominant enough to come into this team and make a massive shift for 50, 60 million. I think financially, obviously, Chelsea will look at it because of the sell-on clause. They'll probably get him at a discount because he's got a year left on his contract in the summer. But that should not be the reason why you're signing him. You should be signing him for the footballing reasons only, which is that you think he's the solution and then this box is completely ticked. You don't need to sign any more centre-backs. Too many times Chelsea do deals where it's because of there's an advantage financially, which could, no, we need to do the deal because on the football pitch, this is a player that's going to take us to a Premier League title.
And off the back of that, I think we all love Levi Colwill, right? I think he's great. I think he's got so much potential. But there's a misconception about Levi Colwill that he is the A-side centre-back. Russell talks about his leadership qualities and he has potential to be a future captain. But is he that A-side centre-back that is the leader at the back line, not only concentrates on his job defensively, but also leads that back line? To win a Premier League, you need that. I talked about needing a striker. You also need a dominant centre-back who's that leader. We were blessed with JT for years and years.
The problem we've got there is JT learned alongside some of the best in the world. Desailly, Leboeuf, right? Colwill, our two centre-back partnership was 18 and 21. Yeah. And that's another reason why I think we are naive at times as a unit, why we concede so many goals second half, is that we are such a young side developing. He hasn't got the benefit of that. I mean, imagine putting like a 27, 28-year-old John Terry alongside Levo Colwill. Imagine that. So they're learning on the job, some of these boys.
Even a 38-year-old Thiago Silva.
There's that as well.
It is about combinations because I've seen average centre-backs be paired with world-class ones and the defence looks fantastic.
Exactly.
And Levo Colwill, you see in that Palace game, the way he steps out and tries to engage with the ball and he leaves that gap behind him for Achimpong to then be in a 2v1 situation with Eze and Mateta. He can't do anything about it. He's obviously failed to do the offside trap a few times, but he's 21. So there's a lot of kind of conclusions being made on him when there shouldn't be, because you look at Christensen when he was here, he was young, he was developing as well. The issue is the experienced defenders that Chelsea have brought in, like Tosin and Disasi, were both on the bench because they're not of the quality potentially to lead this back line, and that's the problem.
And you made such a good point in terms of an incredible centre-back can make average centre-backs look really, really good. And this is a Chelsea show, but let's bring in Liverpool, for an example. We're not going to get a Virgil van Dijk. He's a once-in-a-lifetime centre-back. But I've seen him make Matip look really, really good. I've seen him make Joe Gomez look really good. Right now, I think Konate is a good defender, but not a great defender. But right now, he's making him look amazing. You even look at Arsenal. I think there was a perception of Gabriel before Saliba came in of he's rash. He makes decisions that aren't necessarily beneficial to the team. He's got the bozo gene. As soon as Saliba comes in, he looks like a top centre-back. And that's what the best centre-backs in the world do. I feel like if we get that guy...
Are we going to get that in January, though, Kweku?
No, it's ironic that Liverpool signed Virgil van Dijk in January, and we actually signed Gary Cahill in January, and he went on to become one of our best ever defenders.
So this season, are we going to sign a
I don't think that centre back is available right now. I think that takes extensive scouting. I don't think we just necessarily go for the biggest name.
And Marc Guéhi's not on your radar.
Marc Guéhi, he's a good defender, but for me, he's a B-side defender. He's a player that next to a great defender looks really, really good. But he's not somebody who's going to elevate our back line to a point where we don't concede stupid goals. Yeah. I think he's a front-footed defender, which is not necessarily what we need. We need somebody who's a bit more cerebral, can watch the game, and then decide to make the decisions and help everybody else make the right decisions. I don't think Marc Guéhi brings that to the back line in terms of what we need. And so I get why Chelsea want to make the move. It makes sense financially. But for me, I feel like we should bide our time and wait till the right defender becomes available to really enhance and improve that.
Can we just talk about Nottingham Forest recruitment at centre-half?
Unbelievable.
So you think about those, I think they're probably the best two alongside Gabriel and Saliba. Recruitment. So, you haven't always got to go out and spend 70, 80, 90, 100 million pounds. There are players out there, that's where these little gems, I mean, they played £13 million for Milinkovic.
Yeah.
13. Yeah. Now look at him. Morello, I don't know what they got him, but it wasn't, we're not talking tens and tens and tens of millions. So recruitment is absolutely key as well.
I think the only thing you could do is bring Chalobah back and move on to Disasi purely because stylistically Chalobah's a better fit to play as a wide centre-back. He's quicker across the ground. Yeah, but I think if I'm looking out for Chalobah, I wouldn't come back to Chelsea because we saw what happened in the summer. We know what's going to happen next summer. You're having a great stint at Crystal Palace. You're getting great game time with another former Cobham defender in Guiu. And you could be playing your way into a move, a permanent move to Palace or maybe even better. So it's a real head-scratcher for Chelsea. They put themselves in an awkward position.
Well, let's see what January brings.
Indeed.
Unfortunately, that is it for another episode of Inside Chelsea. We'll be back next Wednesday, the day after our next Premier League game against Bournemouth at the Bridge. As always, if you want to get involved, post your comments below and we'll do our best to answer them. Thank you very much for your company and thanks to Jason, Kweku and Matisse. Don't worry, guys, it's all going to be okay. See you next time, everyone.
Up Chelsea.